for Karen.
Batalia.
Karen Batalia Refuah Shlema.
Amen.
Shir should be for her zechut.
Amen.
All right, my friends. So the plan is to finish up some stuff that I did not cover yesterday. I sent out a review sheet to help you with that, and also to do a review on 253. So, all right. So we're going to start by just answering a question that I kind of left you with at the very end of last night's shir, and that was as follows. We discussed a situation where you have a heating oven, which the goy is going to be heating up, and it's permissible for him to do so. And by the way, I forgot to tell you the rule behind that, so I'm going to tell it to you now. And it's called Hakoil Choilem Eitzel Tzina. Hakoil Choilem Eitzel Tzina means that everybody is considered sick when it comes to cold. When you speak about cold, we're talking about extreme cold, which is why the goy is allowed to heat up the fire to heat the house.
Because for him too, but it's cold.
Not for him. Nothing to do with the goy. The goy doesn't live in your house. He lives in his house. He comes to your house specially to light the fire and put the wood in Shabbos morning. And you ask him to do it, and it's okay. Because the rule is, it's not necessarily life, but it's sickness. You can ask a goy to do on Shabbos anything for a person who is seriously ill, even if he's not deathly ill. If a person is, God forbid, deathly ill, you can do it yourself. You don't have to ask a goy. But a person who is seriously ill, even though it's not dangerous, is allowed to ask a goy, or somebody else can ask a goy, to do work for that person.
What about if everybody is okay?
Yes.
Then it's snow outside freezing.
So here's the thing. Just like you can do work for a sick person, you can have a goy do work for a sick person, you can have a goy do work to make sure that he doesn't get sick.
Oh,
you understand? Same thing. Why should you wait till he gets sick? And then you'll ask the goy to do work. Just prevent him from getting sick in the first place. So that's the concept of having a Shabbos goy. This is where the practice of having a Shabbos goy started. Unfortunately, people thought, well, if I can ask him to turn the oven on, I may as well get him to do a few extra things while he's coming. That's already very complicated. But the principle of him lighting the stove for the heating is okay. So now, we discussed yesterday, what about him putting pots also around the oven, close enough to get heated up, without any conditions of Chazara, obviously. Is that allowed or not? The Magen Avraham said yes, because his main intention is not for the pots. His main intention is to heat the house. Taz says no, because he also has an intention for the pots, and therefore it's not allowed. And finally, we had a discussion about this oven that has a pot attached to it. And that pot would be used to heat different items. And if it was empty, then the thing you had to do to make sure it wouldn't crack was to put water in it. Now we said the goy is allowed to do it because his intention is just to stop it from cracking. And you don't have to stop him, that's fine. You can even tell him to put it in before it's on. Once it's on already, you can't, because you're basically telling him to cook. Even though it's for the intention of protecting the pot from cracking, but you can't. We allow you to tell a goy to do a malacha for the sake of preventing illness, but not for the sake of preventing financial loss. Right? That's a principle. You cannot tell a goy to do a Torah level work to prevent a financial loss. You can tell him to do a rabbinic level work to prevent a financial loss, but not a Torah level work. So for example, if there's a fire, chas v'shalom, somebody's house, You can pour water around it, or you can tell the guy, the most you can tell him is, if a person would put out this fire, he wouldn't lose. Meaning to say he'll get something, I'll pay him, but you can't even say I'll pay. You can't for sure tell him to put it out. You have to say it in this unclear way, and he has to figure it out.
So it's the same thing like the our window.
So the point is that you can tell him to put the water in before it's on, because then when he turns it on, his objective is to heat the house. And the water is a side point. However, here's the thing. The Taz says that if your intention is that you want to also use that water to wash the dishes. Actually, let's start with something else. If he put it there to not crack the pot, and you had no specific intent to use the water, then you can use the water to wash dishes or whatever. But the Taz says, if you intend to use the water, then you can't tell him to do it. Because the problem is that is not considered to be a covered flame, even though it's on top of the oven, but the top of the oven is always there. That's not a reminder not to stoke. So there's nothing to remind you not to stoke, even though the guy is doing it, but you're there and you care about it, you might stoke, not allowed. And even if he did it, you can't use it. Not only that, you can't use it after Shabbos, whatever. However, the Magen Avraham disagreed. And the Magen Avraham said, that it's okay. Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Thank you, Mr. Madir.
Great grandson. A lot of nachas and simcha.
I'm looking forward to be a great grandfather, but that will take a while.
Hashem's help and a good time. Stay healthy and marry the next generation young and Mirz Hashem.
I remember it's not gufo. So this one, like we cannot tell him for loose stuff, so we cannot move something for loose like a computer, or phone, or we cannot move that because it's expensive.
I thought I was late.
Something else. No, something else. Something else. Yes.
So I started reading from the beginning where it talks about day labor.
Whoa. If you're asking on what we're talking about, I'll stop. But if you're asking totally different, then we'll have to wait.
How is it that a person can do everything that you just said and not be considered a day labor? That the goy can
Okay,
come.
well, I'm in the middle of explaining something, and you're bringing in a new topic. Let's finish what we're talking about, please. Thank you. I know you were gone for a few days, so maybe you're one day, so you have to get back into it. But I'm in the middle of explaining this concept. So the point is that the Taz says you can't allow him to do it. The Magen Avraham says, very interesting chiddush. The Magen Avraham says, no, it's okay. Let's just read his words, which I was trying to figure out yesterday, and as I was reading it, I didn't understand it. Now, the Rebbe says, according to the opinion that we mentioned earlier, even if his intention is putting the water in order to heat them up, it's allowed because his main intention is to heat the house. So the question that we had yesterday is, that's all good as far as the goy's intention. And we say it's not his intention is to heat the house, the water is secondary, it's not important. But what about the fact that the Jew might stoke the flame? How does it help that the goy is intending to heat the house in terms of the Jew stoking the flame? So it just hit me this morning, the pshat, that we already said that there is reason to say that on the top of an oven, you don't need to cover the flame again, because the top of the oven already covers the flame. Now we had a machlokes. We had the logic to say, well, the top of the oven is always there, so it's not a reminder. But we said that the minhag is to rely on that in terms of a goy who puts it there, and then the goy heats it up. So if the goy is doing both, we're going to rely on it, because at the time that it's, there is no act of chazor, there is no act that at that moment there's a chashash that he's going to stoke it. You understand? Because when he puts it on, it's not on. When he turns it on, the Jew is not involved. And after all, there is a cover. It's there all the time, but there is a cover. So that's we said that the custom is to be lenient about that. So that's what this custom is referring to. All right, go ahead.
Is there a hole in the top of the oven? This oven that we're talking about?
Is there a hole in the top? No.
Like the fire from the oven, the heat goes up through.
Through the roof. There is no hole.
There's no hole.
No. I'm talking about the ovens of nowadays. Nowadays,
Nowadays.
Alter Rebbe's times, but relatively nowadays, they had an opening on the side. There was no opening on the top.
I'm talking about the ach, right? Fire ach. To warm the house?
Yeah.
So the fire ach.
What's that? Fireplace?
Yes.
No, it's not a fireplace. It's an oven. It's a heating oven. It was made to heat the house, but it wasn't a fireplace. It was an actual oven.
Was it used to cook with, or was it?
No, they would use, while they were heating the house, they would sometimes heat stuff on top of it. Not cook, but heat stuff on top of it.
Was it a pot-belly stove on the thing?
Yeah, they still make this.
Is that what it's for? Popular stoves for heating the house?
Choose to eat those, and then sometimes they put something on top of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. Exactly. All right, day laborer, go right ahead. Yes.
What, my question?
Yes.
I forgot.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, just what's considered a day labor in this sense versus someone who's commissioned.
That's a different discussion, but that whole discussion is when he's doing something that he's not allowed to do for you. And you say he's doing a labor that's not permissible, but because he gets a commission, so it's like he's doing it for himself.
No,
But over here, 1 second. Over here, what he's doing is absolutely permissible. You understand? He's allowed to do it. Just like a guy who comes and helps you serve at the Kiddush.
that helps you out.
Serve at the Kiddush. A waiter, cleans, beautiful. He's not doing anything that's forbidden on Shabbos. So there's no distinction, day labor, commission, blah, blah, blah. He's not doing anything wrong. You understand? That whole distinction is if he's doing something that is a forbidden act on Shabbos, but he's on a commission, okay, so he's doing it for himself. But that doesn't come into the discussion when what he's doing is permissible. Understand?
Did we finish with this topic?
Yes, we did.
If we were able to give a 2-sentence or a short of a summary, I don't want to ask for a long one. I guess I wasn't popping or involved or here. I don't really get what the room is talking. Maybe a 2-sentence summary of what the.
That was the summary.
What was the summary?
And of course, you can do something for someone who's sick without any issues.
No, the one you explained to him just now is the summary?
Yeah, they were initially.
I just gave over the summary of the last discussion of last night. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, listen.
All right, who wants to give a summary of the summary?
I thought it was about just a guy doing getting something up for himself and the Jew.
For himself? What?
Oh, we talked about.
You hear last night?
Ask him to heat something up as long as you benefited from it. You gave the example of a pot that didn't have any water in it.
We talked about if the guy come over on Shabbat to put the fire
To warm up the house,
the
yes.
house. Now it's another subject we supposed last night to put
Yeah,
the pot.
in the cold countries, in the winter.
And then,
Hakol cholim eitzel tzina.
But he couldn't.
Everybody's
So you're allowed to do it, you're allowed to tell a good.
to do an Issa D'Oraisa to prevent serious illness. Go ahead.
and then we talked about last night about if you can put the pot around the house.
Exactly. The Magen Avraham says, yes, why?
Walk around,
The pot's around the oven that he's going to heat up.
just to heat up the.
To heat up the pots in a way that is forbidden, without the conditions of Chazara. You understand?
Yeah. I
No, I take it back. Nothing to do with the conditions of Chazara. You don't need conditions of Chazara for an oven because it's not the normal way to cook, right? The way he's cooking pots. But there's a bishul issue. The stuff
Is
is.
that also in a regular oven? Can I put if I have a Shabbat mode, can I put pots in the oven?
In, we're not talking about in, we're talking about around.
Never said it looks like cooking.
Around. We're talking about around.
Is it
In, we discussed many times that looks like cooking.
pot in an oven, even though it's a pot, not a
You
pan?
talked about
Makes no
the
difference.
color. You couldn't even
Makes
stick
no
it in
difference.
just to keep it warm.
It makes no difference.
Yeah.
You cannot put in.
That looks like the derech of you putting.
You cannot put into an oven without the conditions of Chazar. Even with the conditions of Chazar, there's an issue if the fire is considered covered. but without the conditions of Chazor, there's no way.
Okay. Someone told me this morning, clearly, that you're allowed to put a pot in the oven. Same one who asked me about who told me that the bread is not allowed to go back into the oven. Or bread was not allowed to be put in the oven in the Erev Shabbos because it's mentioned mafia, whatever. Anyway, same person. Point being, so you're saying.
He has to learn, he has to learn.
Yeah, so what I was saying, there's no way to put back, even though the pot doesn't belong in the oven, it doesn't look like it's mubashal, it's still on.
No, that's the Ran. That's the Ran. The Beis Yosef is not passing like the Ran. The Ran says that if you put something that you normally bake on a stovetop or you normally cook in an oven, I mean, it doesn't say those words, but you put things to heat up in a place that is normal for cooking, but not for this thing to cook, that you don't need the conditions of Chazor. The Beis Yosef does not pass him like that, Ran. He quotes him, but he doesn't pass him like that.
So
Yeah.
I thought that we learned if you cover.
Oh, 1 second. Did you get a summary of the summary?
Almost.
Let's just finish. Go.
So we cover about come to make
So he's
the.
allowed to put pots around the fire.
The Magen Avram says he is, because his intention is to heat the home, and the heating of the pots are coincidental, and that's called the Psik Reishal B'Nachri, which is mutter, right? When the goy is doing something mainly that's permissible, and the secondary thing is forbidden, that's okay. The Taz says no, because he knows the goy.
Goy putting the pots.
Goy putting the pots, not the Jew. The Jew cannot, because that's no opinion. Then he's participating in the act of bishul if he puts the pots. Even though he's not turning it on, the goy is turning it on, but he knows the goy is going to turn it on. That's called like a participation in the act of bishul.
Not only not during the fire's on, not even before the fire.
Not even before the fire is on, correct.
Okay.
Now, if the Taz says he cannot do that, because since the goy puts the pots there and then he lights the oven, his secondary intent is to heat the pots, and therefore it's not allowed. And from that, we went on to a similar discussion of a pot that is attached to this heating oven that you sometimes have to put water into to make sure it doesn't split. And the pot, which was,
So why is the pot in there?
the pot is attached to it, which you could use to heat things up. But if it was empty, it could split if you heated up the oven, so they would put water into it. If the goy does that, it's okay. You can even use the water for washing dishes, because it's allowed, that the goy is not intending to cook. But if you intended to use it for washing dishes, then we had a little machlokes that we just mentioned. The Taz says it's a problem because it's like an uncovered flame, and you may stoke the coals, even though you didn't put it there. But because you want to use it, there's a fear you may stoke the coals. The Magen Avram was not concerned about that, and we just explained the reason, because it's on top. So it is a little bit like a covered flame, and since you're not doing anything, the guy is doing everything, so there's no moment that you actually are there that you might stoke it. So the custom is to be lenient on that. That's what the Magen Avram said. That's the synopsis. Go ahead.
I can't take this.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to finish the summary. All right. We are now doing the handout that I sent, placing things and moving things on heat sources on Shabbos. I'm going to go through it. As my basis for this, I used the Sefer Rabbi Forka Shabbos Ka'alacha, chapter 10, in case you want to follow up on anything. And I'm going to go through basically what he says and also the opinions that he brings. I don't have any comments from Aventura or LA or New York or Fort Lauderdale Airport. That was made from the airport. No questions? Everything is clear? London hasn't joined us yet. All right. Shmuel, you okay? Nothing personal. I just wanted to finish my thought. That's all. Sorry. No questions right now. Okay, excellent. Okay. We discussed yesterday that the Machaber says you can put a pot that is burning, you can take it off, put an empty pot there to minimize the heat. Even though the fire underneath it is uncovered, that pot will act as a cover over the fire, and you put the pot back into that pot as long as you follow the conditions of Chazor. And then in Sifhei, the Machaber says you can put onto a full pot even without the conditions of Chazar. So we tried to understand exactly what the reason for the difference is. And the Alter Rebbe seems to bring two explanations for the difference. And that is as follows. The one explanation was that if it's in the pot, so the pot kind of becomes batel, it becomes like secondary to the food. One pot, two pots, they both become secondary to the food. Whereas if it's a full pot, it's not secondary, it's like blocking it. That's one explanation. Another one is that the pot, because it's empty, so it becomes like nullified to the oven. It's like it's just acting as a cover for the oven. But if it's full, then it's considered a separate item, and therefore it's able to act as a separation. Yeah.
At one point, we said this time also about the pot is going on far from the gechalim, not untouched the gechalim. It's coming like the 2 cup you saw us yesterday. It's on far from the gechalim, and then you put out the pot on the top.
Well, if you're putting the pot down, obviously, we said yesterday you can't put it on top of the coals because you're going to be moving those coals and affecting their heat and fire. But if there's already a pot there, which it could be that the pot is directly on the gechalim, on the coals, and you'll take it out through a goy, like we discussed before, and you're just putting on top of that pot, that's okay.
But if it's moved, then it's
You're putting on top of the pot. You're not putting the pot down. You're not taking the pot up. To take the pot up, you'll get a goy.
because you may move it, right?
To take it out, we said you need a goy, because otherwise you may move it.
To put it down, you don't fret if it's moved or something like that.
To put it down directly, no, you cannot put it
On
down
top of
directly.
the pot.
On top of the pot is okay. Just be careful.
And we don't need to worry about if the under pot is going
No,
to.
you just be careful. I wouldn't say that. I don't think it's a sure thing that's going to move. It's not your intention, and it's not a psikration. Unless it's for sure going to move, it's okay.
And when I remove it, it's not my attention too, right?
Then it's a psikration, and it's for sure going to move.
Secret.
We discussed
that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so based on that discussion of the difference between an empty pot and a full pot, there is a discussion in the Achronim about putting directly onto a blech. I'm actually not going to follow the order of the handout that I gave. I'm just going to speak what comes to my mind. So when it comes to putting it on a blech, you have the one perspective is that that's not a normal place to cook. You don't normally cook on a blech. And maybe it's not nullified to the pot like an empty pot is, because it's not inside of it. It's more like an upside down pot. It's not in it. On the other hand, from the other perspective, you could say that because its purpose is simply to cover the fire, so it does become nullified to the pot, to the oven, and therefore it doesn't create like a separate space like a full pot. And therefore it might be forbidden to put it on a blech. I'm talking about without the conditions of chazar. Again, with the conditions of chazar, it's no problem. But without the conditions of chazar. And again, we are talking about when the thing that you're putting back has no bishul issue, fully cooked. If there's liquid, it's still warm, and so on, or maybe even hot. But the issue is, do you have to keep the conditions of chazar? That depends if you're putting it on a place that's normal to cook. So that's the question. Is it considered normal to cook on a blech? Well, you don't normally cook on a blech during the week. But on the other hand, if it's considered just a cover to the oven, to the stove, maybe it's not a separate space. It's nullified to the stove, and maybe it's still considered a place that's fit for cooking. So, in practice, Reb Moshe is strict, and that is a general Ashkenaz minhag. I believe the Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasei is also strict. Now, I was looking in the Yalkut Yosef, and I thought it was going to say that it's permissible and that you don't have to keep the conditions of chazar. That's what I remembered. But when I looked at it carefully, I realized that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef distinguishes between something between something that is dry and something that has liquid. All right, listen very carefully.
I didn't get this scenario.
Sorry?
I didn't really get this scenario.
Okay, here's the scenario. You want to heat up your kugel on Shabbos morning, or your schnitzel. You want to take it out of the fridge and you want to heat it up. Let's say that it's dry. Again, the definitions of dry differ according to the different poskim, and whatever. We're not getting into that. Let's say it's considered dry. Rice, challah, whatever, you name it, something that's considered dry. So you obviously cannot put it in a place that's normal to cook because you don't have any conditions of chazar. It's in the fridge, it's cold, it's not in your hands, you don't have nothing besides the fact that it's fully cooked. So nevertheless, if you put it on a place that's not normal to cook, that's okay. Like on top of a pot. That's on top of a pot is the classic example, that's no problem. The question is, can you put it on a blech or not? What's the difference? Talking about a full pot or a full pan, or something that has food inside of it. What's the difference, pot or pan? Yeah.
I thought you
Question.
meant empty.
You know what? I'm going to get to that soon. I'm going to get to that soon. I skipped maybe when I went to the blech straight, but I'll get to that soon. Okay, so again, many poskim are machmir. Rabbi Ovadia says dry stuff, yes. Dry stuff you can do without the kedus chazar. Are strict. On top of a blech, only on top of a pot, or on top of an overturned pot on the blech. We'll get to that soon. Now, when it comes to putting something back that has liquid in it, that is defined as a davar lach, however you define that, again, majority, whatever, different opinions. Let's say we define it as a davar lach. So of course it has to still be hot to be able to put it back. But let's say it is still hot, but you didn't keep the conditions of chazor. You served your chicken soup on Friday night, and you did not keep the conditions of chazor. You were not planning to put it back. You took it off, you brought it to the table, you served it. It still happens to be hot, not just hot, but yad selet is boy. And then you think, you know what? So-and-so didn't come yet. Let me put it back on the blech, and it'll be hot for him. Rav Ovadia says you cannot. You cannot put it back on the blech if you didn't keep the conditions of chazara, if it is lach. Where does that come from? What's the point of being more strict with something with something liquid that's hot, than something dry that's cold? Something liquid that's hot is also ein bishul achar bishul, and something dry that's cold is also ein bishul achar bishul. There's no prohibition to cook either one of them, to heat either one of them. So what is it?
Because you finished the melacha, you took it and you move it and it's done.
The melacha is finished. It's already cooked. There's no ein bishul achar bishul. There's no melacha here.
From the block.
Ein melacha. There is no melacha. Ein bishul achar bishul means in, not. That's what it means.
Why everybody machmir if it's a bishul? Because it's a weight. It's
Who's
liquid.
machmir? Who's machmir?
You're allowed to put back soup and to make it.
We're learning why yes or no. We're learning, yes?
If you have a chedush, Baruch Hashem.
So Baruch Hashem, listen up. So here's the chiddush, and it's based on a contradiction between two seifim in the Machaber. You'll forgive me for maybe dwelling on this for more than appropriate in this shir. I just thought it was interesting. It's in the handout. You guys have a copy? No. Okay. I'm just going to say it quickly. Forgive me. I hope you get it. If you don't, it's also good.
Which number on the
8b. As to the difference between liquid and solid, see 318.7 and 8. And here's a quote of the Machaber in Siv Zayin of Shin Yud Ches, 318.7.
Which
Rabbi Yosef Karo. יש מפורשים, דהור שואל להניח על כלי שיש בדבר חם על גבי קדיר התמונה אפילו כלי התחתן על אש שרב, יש מפורשים שם כלי התחתן על אש לא אילם עשר. He's talking about putting a pot on top of another pot. Some say you can only do it if the bottom pot is not on the fire, and some say if the bottom pot is on the fire, you cannot. and he doesn't paskin. And the second opinion is usually the halacha, by the way, for your information. Whenever there's a machlokes brought, and they're both yesh omrim, yesh v'yesh, the halacha is like the second opinion. All right? That's a good rule to know. It's talking about when you want to put a pot to keep warm on top of another pot that is tmuna. No, on top of. Right?
Which one's tamun?
The bottom one is tamun. The question is it tamun just not on the fire, or is it tamun on the fire?
Is it tamun on the fire or is it not on the fire?
Exactly. Is it just hot, but wrapped in clothing? That's why it's hot. And you want to put another pot on it to keep its heat. That's one. That's for sure allowed. That's second. If you want to put another pot on top of one that's tamun on the fire, I mean, how do you do tamun on the fire is another question, because you can't wrap it directly, but let's say you just put it on the top, not on the sides, or whatever.
Right? The fire is here. And
Whatever. It's on the fire, however you want it to be. So then the Machaber says, some say you cannot put a pot on top of that pot that's on the fire.
Because it's tamun.
No, because it's on the fire. Not because it's tamun. In the first case, it's also tamun, but it's off the fire. There you can put another pot on top of it to keep it hot. But if it's on the fire, yesh omrim that you cannot. What is it helping? Why not? What's the problem? You're putting a pot on another pot off the fire. Why is it helping? Because it's hotter. It's hotter. The bottom pot is hotter. It has blankets all around it. It's very hot. The top pot is not as hot. You want it to keep hot. You put it on top of that pot.
it is. The chalim is here, and then you put another pot on here. So it's
That's the second. That's if it's on top of on the fire. In number 8, he says, no. Okay, number 8. Laniach davar karsh nesbashal kol tzorka al gab mecham shala eish. יש להם שדינים כמניחי כנגד המדור, וכל דבר שמותר להניחי כנגד המדור, במקום שעשרס בו כגון שיובש, מותר להניחי על גבי מחם של גבי אש. יש שם דבי כמניח על גבי קיר לכתחילה, ואז אפילו נתפש של כל צוק אפילו מסם הגרל, אפילו מלס נשם לשמה חומי, וראשון נראה עיקר. Now he talks about, the first case it was a pot with liquid that you were putting on top of another pot. The top pot was already hot, but you wanted to keep it hot. So he said maybe you can't do it because if the bottom one is on the fire. When it comes to putting a cold one on the fire, but it's fully cooked and it's dry, he says some say not on top of a pot that's on the fire. Some say not. Some say yes. Some say no. But Rishon Nir the main halacha is like the first one. So the Magen Avraham asks, in Zion he brought 2 opinions and he did not say what the halacha is. On the contrary, the second opinion is a strict one. Usually we go like the second opinion.
The second one says cold, like liquid or
Solid. And ches, this is on Shabbos. Yeah, this is on Shabbos.
and they changed the halacha. The second one, now they changed it to the first one.
It's on top of a pot. You don't cook on top of a pot.
So you said put it directly on the pot and it's already cooked.
On top of a pot is not the way to cook. You have one pot that's on the fire. You're putting something else on top of that pot. That's not a normal way to cook.
So put it in the first pot, you can't just put it back on the fire.
The first pot you're not touching. You're leaving it there the whole time, in this case. And you're putting another pot on there. So he said a pot that has liquid and is still hot, you can't put a pot on top of that. You can't put that pot on top of a pot that's on the fire, according to the second opinion. Whereas if it's solid and cold, you can, even though it's on the fire. That's the main halacha.
It's cooked or not cooked?
Fully cooked. It's not fully cooked, you cook it.
We said before, we follow all the time the second, if it's a machloket, the second one is the right. So this time they said that the first one is the right.
The Machaber Pascha is like the first one. I'm talking about if it doesn't say.
They changed the
No, it doesn't change anything. If it says yesh for yesh and it doesn't
yesh
say the
for yesh.
halacha,
Okay.
it says yesh for yesh and it doesn't say the halacha is like the second one.
Okay.
Here it says yesh. The Rishon Nirika, the first one's the main.
What's the difference between that and the pot?
What's the difference? The Magen Avraham explains. If you have it in the Hebrew. The answer is, listen carefully, יש להם דווקא צולי מותר ליטנה לכתחילה, אגב בקיר גופר, אבל מבושל עשה ליטנה אגב בקדרה, כי אפילו חם משום בשל דגזרינן, שמעיתן עליו כשהוא קר. Again, if it's a solid food, then you can put it on top of a pot that's on the fire, because there's not much that can go wrong. If it's a liquid that's still hot, there's an additional gzeira, and that is that you might end up heating it if it's cooled down. Of course, now it's not cold. If it would be cold, it would be a serious problem with bishul. But there's an additional gzeira. We're not gonna be so fast to allow it.
So it kind of says it on the first one with the solid, it's not the place that the olive be short. But on the other one, it could be in the budget if you want to.
This I don't know. I've never done experiments of cooking solids on pots or cooking liquids on pots. And I imagine that you can't cook either one on top of a pot. That's what I imagine. But that's not what the Magen Avraham is saying anyway. The Magen Avraham is saying that when it's liquid, there's an additional gzeira that he might heat it up if it's cold. Yes.
Can the pot have holes?
So wait,
What do you mean? Does it have a cover or not?
Like a pot, I'm sorry?
Does it have a cover or not? You can't put it in the
A
pot.
pot on top of a pot, but the second pot has holes on the bottom.
Yeah, can have holes.
Right, so then you're creating like a steam.
You can have holes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, but the top pot has a cover.
Wait, wait.
You're not putting it into the top pot. For that you need to just chazar
I
major.
thought the top pot was bigger than the bottom part.
No makes a difference if it's bigger or smaller. It has a cover. You're not putting anything into it. You're putting it on top of it.
How do you put a pot on?
Oh, I see. The bottom pot has.
The bottom pot is covered, of course. Absolutely. You cannot put a pot into, you're not putting it into, you put it on top of.
Why is this a problem? You have a pot, you have a fire pot, a divider, another pot. It's like a double plaza, like a double.
Who said there's a problem? Why is there a problem?
It's a discussion.
It is a discussion. And according to the Mechaber, you can only do it if the top is dry, if the top contains something dry, not if it contains a liquid, because in addition to the issue of putting it on a pot, you have the issue of if it would be cold, it would be a problem to reheat it.
What does it mean the D-rack call?
You mean the last line of Ches? That's talking about the contents of the top pot. If it's cold and it has liquid,
Yes.
then it's also according to everybody because it's mamish bishul. That's going back in the beginning. Ches says, one second, let me just answer. Ches,
Why is it cold?
look at the beginning of Ches. Laniach dover kar, shnesbashal kol tzorke, ba 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 ba. That's the whole discussion. Now, going back to that, which we said in the beginning, that's all if it's dry. If it has tafshil, sheyesh b'roitiv, if it has liquid and it's cold, well, then it's also because it's bishul. Sorry.
So why do we need the first one?
The issue is only if it's cold, not if it's hot. So there's no chashash. Again, about the chashash, if nobody can reheat it.
Yes,
It's cold.
He's explaining the machab. He himself doesn't hold that way. One second. He himself doesn't hold that way. He himself says at the end of that Magen Avraham, he says you should be mekel. There's a Magen Mishnah. He is mekel.
Even on cold. On the cold.
No. Even on liquid, that is still hot. That you can put liquid.
Liquid is still hot.
Yeah.
So nobody is Michael on a salad that is cold.
Yeah, everybody's mekel on a salad
On
that's
the
cold.
liquid that is cold.
No, liquid that is cold is bishul.
What's the
The Rambam is mekel, but we don't pass on the Rambam.
The
Issue, I'm sorry?
definition of cold for that.
Less than Yatzeledas. Well, the Ramah is mekel even if it's less than Yatzeledas, if it's still
So what
hot
is-
enough to serve
what
your
is the line
guests.
exactly?
hot enough to serve your guests. I never heard of a specific temperature, and I imagine that it changes for each food. I don't know.
But we started to talk about before about if you put something on a block and everybody starts questioning and we changed the subject about the block. If we put something on a block, even.
on top of the,
Remember?
No,
how do we,
I think this is the subject we're in the middle of. I don't think I changed it.
how do we hold today with regards to a pot on top of a pot that's covered? Do we even have such pots that can do that? Heat to such a way of serving?
Do we have them?
I mean, if I
don't know.
took the top off, then it would still be a pot of divider, and then, these pots are thick.
You know what? If the top pot is bigger than the bottom pot, I think it's okay even if you take the cover off, as long as it doesn't sit in it.
And it doesn't look like cooking.
No, doesn't look like cooking. If it has holes in it, maybe I don't know. If that's a normal way to cook, steam, whatever, that would be different.
The food will eventually get hot.
That's exactly what we're talking about. If it wouldn't get hot, there would be nothing to talk about. You could do whatever you want if it wouldn't get hot. Even if it would be raw food, I mean, it's not going to get hot. Yatsa let us go. There's no issue.
If I remember correctly, not everyone agrees that put pot on top of a pot. It's not considered cooking. Everyone agrees it's okay.
Well,
It's not the way to cook.
Do we have anything?
everyone that we learned yesterday said it was okay.
I remember
Now, everyone that we said yesterday, and every other discussion we've had in this year has said that it's okay. Now we're learning that the way the Magen Avram understands the Mechaber, even on top of another pot, you can only put something solid, not something liquid, even if the liquid is hot. That's the Chiddush, unless you have the conditions of Chazar.
with the
That's
soup.
something new.
With the soup.
Something new we're learning
With
today.
the soup. And you start to say about Rabbi Yosef,
Now, Rabbi Yosef considers the blech like a pot. Nevertheless, to put something liquid on it, he says you have to keep the conditions of Chazar.
so liquid no.
Liquid, no, unless you kept it in your hands.
But you say you got it from and you didn't put in because someone else keep brushing.
No, he got it from this Magen Avram. This
You got it
whole,
from- okay.
this Magen Avram explains a contradiction between the Mechaber, different things he says. The way he explains it is, if it's dry, you don't need the conditions of Chazar, you could put it back even if it's cold and wasn't in your hand or whatever. But if it's liquid, then not, because you may end up putting it back when it's too cold. And therefore you have to keep the conditions of Chazar only if it's in your hand and everything like that.
Okay, but now we're going back, or more back, because remember saying if most of the opinions say that it's not the way to do it, so you need to follow it.
So what's your question?
If like, let's say 6 or 7 poskim say that it's not considered cooking, and one said yes, we're not supposed to follow the one.
So who's the one? So who's the one?
Just say the Mechaber is the one, yes from today. Before all of them,
Okay.
it's not them again.
Doesn't
The
look-
Mechaber is strict. The Mechaber is strict. The Mechaber is not lenient. He's strict.
But it's the only one.
He's the strictest.
I'm not going to say he's the only one because I didn't learn everybody. I think it's Rabbeinu Yerucham. The two opinions that he's quoting here in that discussion that the Magen Avram brings is Rabbeinu Yerucham. So he didn't make them up. You know what I mean? He's explaining that opinion, and he's more strict regarding the case of liquid than solid. But I think it's based on Rabbeinu Yerucham. He was a student of the Rosh.
Do we talk about the, again, they're talking about the pots of then, right? Covering them, it's not like an actual top? Or it is an actual top?
Why not?
Okay, you put it, I
I
can put
don't
a
know.
towel on top of my pot, steam will go faster, or a thinner pot, or. a different
There's no.
material.
I take it back. It's not about a cover or not cover. It's about the pot going into the bottom pot or being on top of it. It can't sit inside of it. But if it's on top of it, it makes no difference if it has a cover on it.
You could have a pot that's the same size as the one underneath, and then it'll get, it's almost like a direct steam.
Okay. As long as it doesn't go into it. Okay.
Tongue transfers.
I'm sorry.
No, I think it's cooking.
It's not cooking because it's already cooked. There is no cooking after cooking.
It's not done bishul and it's in the top.
Yeah.
The question is, does it look like cooking? That's the question. And because it's not a normal way to cook, it's not forbidden as far as looking like cooking. That's what we're discussing. We're not discussing actual cooking.
So if I had removed my pot initially, could I technically do this later on?
How are you going to get a full pot on the, if you have a full pot on the oven?
From
Yeah,
something else, I have my soup here.
absolutely. That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying, yes. As long as you follow these conditions. As long as you follow these conditions. If it's liquid, it still has to be hot. According to the Mechaber, if it's liquid and hot, you have to follow the other conditions of Hazar, keep it in your hand. And if it's solid, as long as it's fully cooked, yes. That's the bottom line.
I guess you asked me a question. But you have to put in the oven, and then the oven is off and it's still hot. Then you have to put it on the left.
Yeah,
And I think you said, no problem.
yeah.
I think in Shabbat Alach, Ben Asiri Rishon said that you're not allowed.
Can be.
It wasn't on the same fire.
איפה?
We're talking about the Oracle shut the electric.
Careful.
That's what we're talking about.
I don't understand. What's the problem?
כל השושי שכלל לא היה עליו בכניסת השבת, אלא בא אתה למלכו עליו שהדבר אסור. למרות שהיא גרופה בכתומה, עולה בשורה זו מפרה בשם השם.
No, it's in this.
the fire before that,
That's on the fire. If it's in the oven and the oven is still hot, that's called on the fire.
not on Makor Atzma.
That is the makar atzma. The oven is the makar atzma. The oven is the makar atzma. What does it mean?
But it's not on.
Doesn't make a difference. It's still hot. As long as it's hot, it's still the same, whether it's on or not. It makes no difference. Just like a kira grufa in the olden days, you took all the coals out. It had the same difference.
Even the food, it's still, like, כתב שהוא רותח, לא מסתמק ברעב. You see the other one in between? האיסור האמור הוא גם על תחום הכתב רותח, ואף מצטמק ברעב.
That's correct.
זה הכי.
Yeah.
So why we can't do it from the oven?
Because an oven that is still hot is the same as an oven that is on. There's no difference if it's hot and off or hot and on. Just like in the olden days, there was no difference between an oven that you remove the coals, that's grufa, or an oven that you cover the coals, that's ketum.
It's still boiling. It's still retaining its heat. So why cannot do that?
Because if it's not in the oven, then it looks like you're starting something new. If it is in the oven, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. You're taking it off the counter where it's not a place for cooking, and you're putting it down in the place of cooking for the first time. If you take it from one place of cooking, you're allowed to move it to another place of cooking. That's the whole concept of chazor. That's what we're learning.
How can it be cooking if we remove the coals? I thought we learned that the first week. That once the coals are removed, there's no intention, there's nothing, you can't poke the coals, it's not considered cooking. So the fact that you have it in the hot oven, I don't understand.
What's your question?
Off of what he's saying, the fact that the oven is still hot, why can't you use
Use what?
the oven if it's hot? If we remove the coals already.
What's your question? What do you mean by use it? I don't understand your question.
You're talking about to put the on the oven?
Yeah. If you take it from on top and you put it inside.
You can't put it inside an oven, we discussed. Can't
No,
put it
but
inside an oven.
only this oven. We're not talking about today's oven. If we remove the coals, we learned that there was no bishul, there was nothing there's no coals to turn and you can see that. So it
No,
looks
on the
like
contrary,
there
we
is
said
no-
that's on the contrary. We said even if you remove the coals, there's still an issue of stoking because there are some little coals left. Okay, let's continue. On top of another pot, allowed with conditions of bishul. Here's another point that the post can bring up. I saw in the Shmer Shabbos Kol Chasa. It just reminds us of an issue that is discussed in Shin Yud Ches. And that is that the Ramah is strict on congealed fat. and he considers that a person who heats up congealed fat is moilid, is called creating. Changing the fat from a solid to a liquid is called creating, similar to melting ice and turning it from ice into water. So for Ashkenazim, there is something to bear in mind when you want to reheat on top of a pot. Even if you follow everything we're learning about, it's fully cooked, it's halachically dry, let's say. Again, how is it dry if it's liquefied fat? I mean, if it's solid fat, it's another question. But let's say you go by the poskim, let's say that if it's dry now, it's considered dry, even though it's going to liquefy later. But nevertheless, if it's going to turn from a solid to the liquid, the Ramah would forbid it. That's just something to remember. Okay.
Is liquid considered as a liquid, or is solid cheese and melted cheese also considered liquid?
That's an interesting question.
It's a solid alternative.
It's an interesting question. The Alter Rebbe, when he's talking about what is a solid and what is a liquid, has an interesting hagdara, an interesting description. He says, "Be'inyan she'i efshar l'shofchan ela l'hotziyan bekaf." The fact that you can't pour it out and you need to use a spoon to remove it is a sign that it's a solid. I don't know if that's the only definition, but that is a definition. So it sounds like a solid. I don't think.
You won't be able to melt it to such a degree if it's on melted.
Yeah. And in Hilchas Brachas, for example, the definition is when you drink it, do you turn it with your tongue before you drink it? You know what I mean? Like if you're drinking a drink, you just drink. You don't need your tongue at all. But if you're eating something with, some substance, usually move it around in your mouth a little bit, chew it a little bit, whatever. That expression is used. So, but I don't know if that applies here. Okay. So, inside another pot, we said you need the conditions of Chazara. Okay, what about in an oven? What if you want to put something back into an oven, but you want to put it on a pot that's in an oven? Amachaya. Let's say your oven is considered covered. However, if you hold that if the fire is covered by the walls of the oven, or if you actually have some kind of metal contraption in there that covers it. I'm sorry? Whatever. Let's say you hold it's considered a covered flame, whatever the situation. But I'm going to put it on top of a pot that's in the oven. So maybe I don't need the conditions of Bishul, of Chazara, excuse me. What do you say?
He said anything in the oven is considered hot.
So Rav Farkash says in an oven people do often put pots on pots. You know what I mean? If there's no room, you put different layers. So that's not considered because the heat is coming from all around. It's not on a stovetop. When you put it so high, it doesn't get cooked normally. So that's different. So it doesn't help.
So it's okay.
No, you cannot. It's not okay. You cannot put it in an oven even on top of a pot.
Even without a pot, it's still for sure. No, just put it in like that.
Without a pot, it's for sure there. Without a pot, you for sure have to keep conditions of Chazara. His question is, what if you put it on a pot? Maybe it's not derech bishul. He says, no, it is, because sometimes you do that in and out. Okay. Now, we discussed yesterday about an upside-down pot, and it turns out it's not so simple. I thought upside-down pots were fine. But after reading Rav Farkash and looking up his sources, it turns out that the Mishnah Berurah is strict. The Shmir Shabbos is not sure. And Rav Farkash himself says only to do it if you need it for enjoying Shabbos. But if you can get by without it, better not. However, I wasn't totally wrong either. Because there is a heter as follows. Okay, let me just explain why they are machmir. They say that a upside down pot maybe does not act as a hefsek, right? To create a new space. The whole point is that it should be considered that you're not putting it on the oven. You're putting it on a separate space. So maybe since the whole purpose of the pot is just to cover the oven, it doesn't serve any purpose other than covering the oven. So once again, maybe it's nullified to the oven. A full pot has its own purpose of being there. You're cooking with it. So therefore, what's on top of it is not considered to be on the oven. But what's on an empty pot, even if it's upside down, that empty pot has no importance. You understand? Its whole purpose is just to cover them. It's not good enough. That's what they want to. Shlomo Zalman is not sure. Reb Moshe says no good. But anyway, sorry, the Mishnah Berurah is mashma that it's no good. Nevertheless, Shlomo Zalman comes up with a heter. And this is what's well known. I just didn't know the nuances. Shlomo Zalman says, if you have a blech and then an upside down pot, then it's okay. Because the problem in upside down pot is that it's serving the function of covering the fire. So therefore it's nullified to that fire. It doesn't create a separate space. If you have the blech, fire's already covered. So now the extra space of that pot serves no purpose other than to create an extra space, and therefore it's allowed.
So if you have a plata,
I'm sorry?
you have a plata, you have to put a blech down first and then turn the pot upside down, or you don't need a.
Wow, that's an interesting shot. That's an interesting shot. It's an interesting shot. I hear your question. No, his question is if you have a plata and you don't have a blech on the plata, so upside down pot is maybe just covering that plata and it's not creating a separate space. So I hear your question, but the point is that many poskim are matir a plata even without a pot, directly on the plata, because they want to argue that you don't cook on a plata. You just use it to heat or to keep things out, not to actually cook. So because of upside down pot, there is some reason to say that it does work in general, even on a fire. And even though I said before Mishnah Berurah is strict, but I'm saying there's room to be lenient. And the plata itself, some are lenient. So together, I don't think you have to be mad. Yes.
Why doesn't everyone say that a plata, the electric plata, that nowadays is not a way to cook?
Because the question is, do we define cooking as cooking from raw, or do we define cooking as the way it's defined on Shabbos? On Shabbos, when you reheat a liquid, exactly, it's the Torah calls it cooking. Yeah.
Then a bluff, okay?
Yeah.
And then I put a piece of metal on top of that.
Yeah.
This will bring extra, less strict in that.
Maybe. You mean to do chazorah?
Maybe. Also soup, I will go harder.
No, soup only if it's still hot. You mean without conditions of chazorah, but it's still hot.
But if you put it on the block,
No, it has to be
piece
hot.
of metal, like really
Has to be hot.
has to be hot.
Yeah, the only way you can put cold soup is if you put it in a way that it's not going to heat up. Never, no matter how long you leave it there.
What if your intention wasn't to heat it up and then it didn't?
That's what I'm saying. You cannot put it in a place that would possibly heat up, even if it would take it hours, because you may forget.
Well, for space reasons, you just took it and you put it there.
Not allowed.
What if it was for garbage? No, it's still cooking.
What about warm, not heat?
It's never going to reach yad, so let us buy. It's okay.
If I put in a block like this, a piece of metal, and I can put my hand like that.
Then it's never going to reach yad, so let us buy. If it's not yad, so let us buy, it's not going to make the podcast.
So if I build something with like not yet, so let us buy. It's warm
It's
enough.
okay. Absolutely.
Okay.
You can heat up whatever you want to that because it's not considered cooking according to the Torah.
So it can get warm.
Warm is not cooking.
But it can get warm.
What's warm? Less than yad, so let us buy. That's not
That's
cooking.
lettuce is very hot. So let us go. Who wants to eat something else?
There are different shiurim of yad, so let us buy. Reb Moshe says that from 110, you have to be strict in yad, so let us buy.
But I thought you said hot enough to serve your guests. You do something on a pot that gets the whole purpose. It's good looking.
No.
Hot.
Hot enough to serve your guests is not yad, so let us buy. Hot enough to serve your guests is the Ramah's leniency that if something is liquid and it used to be hot and it's cooled down, that's less than yes, let us buy, but it's still hot enough to serve your guests, you can reheat it. That's all. but it's not considered cooked. Like if it was raw and you bring it to that point, it's not considered cooked.
How's 110 degrees actually? People live at 110 degrees.
120, what's boiling, 120?
Why, you kidding me?
212.
It's under.
What's the benefit of,
Yeah, that's what, just, yeah.
what's the benefit of this header of,
Yeah.
to put an upside down pot on the left, if you could just put your food on the left?
That's a machlokes. Putting your food on the blech is a machlokes.
Can't you cook with a blech, though?
We just said that in general, we accept that.
Who said? No, I didn't say
You
that.
just say now.
I said the Shmir Shabbos is machmir, Reb Moshe is machmir, Bavad Yosef is makel with solid foods. With liquids, even if they're hot, he says you need the conditions of chazar. Although he does say, by the way, a person who is makel, you shouldn't protest, even with liquid, but better for a person to be strict with liquid.
That's with the pot.
Why? What is he
No, not
doing?
the blech.
That's with the blech, only with the
Because of
blech,
blech.
only with the blech.
But another,
And with the pot, the liquid's also we have a problem, right? Because there's a zero that even with hot liquid, you do cold liquid. So liquids are out of the question regardless of how you do it.
According to Ravadia.
Rabbi,
According to Ravadia, the Ashkenazim don't go by that difference between solid and liquid. They say if chazorah is allowed, because it's not a normal way to cook, it's allowed for hot liquids too. If it's not allowed, because it is no normal way to cook, it's not allowed for solids either. Because that Magen Avraham, if you have the hand out there?
Yeah.
That Magen Avraham, if you look at the end of it, after he explains the Machaber, he himself says, he says, even though that's Machaber's opinion, but the Magen Mishnah is Mekel, so I'm going to be Mekel. And that's how Ashkenazim go. So I'm saying, for Ashkenazim, the advantage of a pot or even upside down pot on a blech is that if you hold a blech is forbidden without Kenes Chazara, so the upside down pot creates a separate space, which would make it allowed.
To the Ashkenazim, well, that's forbidden.
That what is on a blech?
The blech.
Yeah, I would say the mainstream Ashkenaz opinion is it's forbidden. But Moshe and Shlomo Zalman, I mean, you can't get more top than those. But Moshe in America, Shlomo Zalman in Eretz Yisrael, I think that's like tops.
And there's a difference between solid and liquid. Hot
No.
and cold.
No difference.
no, I never tried it to put pot on the block,
Yeah,
but when you put a pot, it's far away from the block. It's reached the side. That's all it's for? I don't think so, Rabbi. I can try, but my a block on a pot is like, it's like,
Pot's still gonna heat up though.
you will not hit that sort of ball. It's far away.
I don't know. Go home on Shabbos and try it out and see what
Try it
happens.
before Shabbos, just
Metal,
Of course,
Thank
before Shabbat.
No,
before Shabbos to
I
make
never
sure.
Dry, if it's dry and fully cooked, you can try it on Shabbos. Why
I
not?
never tried that.
reach it. It would reach that, so that's what you take it out before.
That's not allowed because you may forget.
What if it's
So it's on budget.
Shin Yud Ches. You have to be strict on these things. Okay, let's just go back. Daniel wants to know, what is Reb Moshe strict about? Reb Moshe is strict about a blech. He said that a blech is considered a normal way to cook, and you can't put back on it without the condition of chazar.
Pot is-
Daniel says
Different
to
than a
please.
plata.
I'm sorry?
Different than a
Plata we'll get to. Daniel Ram says, please, okay, mute your microphones. You all saw that. You can answer this later. Daniel Kahani says, but with the conditions of chazara, is a person allowed to put something back inside an oven? So in Shulchan Aruch it says you're not allowed because an oven is considered a place that's more the way to cook than on top of the oven. But the argument is made that nowadays our ovens are not, there's no inside and outside of the ovens because the top is a stove, which is a separate instrument almost, a separate, what's the word? A separate utensil, whatever, system. So therefore, there is really no difference between the inside and the outside, and you should be allowed to, but practically, because you cannot put anything back without the flame being covered, it's very difficult to do that in an oven. So, I mean, the suggestion is maybe to create some kind of metal box in an oven, but that's not so simple. So,
Shabbat mode, work.
I mean, I have seen, I think the Yaakov Yosef seems to say that if the oven has, if the fire is not like open in the oven, it's closed within the oven, like the walls of the oven, that it could be considered covered. Which is a chiddush, because according to the Magen Avraham, we said anything that is always there is not going to be a reminder. So, but I'm sure he has other poskim that say if it's covered, even if it's always covered, it's considered covered. So that's
So you have to have your oven, have the heat coming from within the wall?
right.
Do any ovens have that?
Yeah.
Yes, if you have a
Plenty
gas
of them.
burner.
Plenty of
the Metal plate on top.
Plenty of them. Yeah. Yeah, gas ovens. Very often the flame is not visible. You know what I mean? It's like underneath a.
But then it's also an open flame because there's holes for the heat to rise out of.
I'm not sure. I hear. I'm not sure. I hear, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
So we're in the oven of Shabbat according to the Pitusim Day.
I don't want to say. I don't want to say this. It would seem to me that an oven, a Shabbat oven, does not help for that, because what does Shabbat oven do? After all, it just makes it more difficult to change the temperature. But it's not impossible to change the temperature. It's just more difficult. That's not clear that it's the same as Grufa and Ketum. It's not clear. I don't know. I know the Star K doesn't hold that it's Grufa and Ketum. They're the ones who give the hechsher on those Shabbos ovens, and they hold that it's a very limited use, the whole Shabbos oven concept. So last time we were learning this, somebody actually called them or emailed them, and it was very limited. Like it was not for the purpose of Chazar, in their opinion. Yeah.
If a person is by themselves, are they allowed to put things in and out of the oven?
No. Makes no difference if you're by yourself or not. Hashem is watching all the time. Daniel says, if the oven is turned off, then could you? If it's still Yatzalet Boy, no. I think the Alter Rebbe is even strict with less than Yatzalet Boy. The Mishnah Berurah is lenient.
So it looked like cooking like you said.
Exactly. The Mishnah Berurah is lenient. If it's less than Yatzalet Boy, I believe the Alter Rebbe is strict, as long as it's hot, even less than Yatzalet Boy, in an oven. Okay. On a radiator.
In a car.
Yes, you're allowed to put.
No, I'm talking. I mean, in the house, in like a heater.
Yeah, yes.
A
Like
heater
New
is what I
York.
mean. Like in New York, where you have those,
It's not the Derek Bishul, Rabbi.
So it's definitely not derech bishul. You could heat up on it. There's no question about it. However, it's not a normal way to cook, and Rabbi Moshe says you're allowed to do it, as long as there's no actual bishul. Maybe to say something dry or something liquid that's still hot. Rav Farkash questions this because, after all, the heat source, it's not covered. I mean, it's covered just because it's covered, but I'm saying there's no extra covering to remind you not to change the temperature. But it could be that because it's such an unusual place to cook, that we're not worried that you're going to change the temperature because it's so unusual. The fact that it's on there. Well, somebody has the temperature. Maybe you don't have it. I mean, there's a control somewhere. No, they don't have it. The guy in charge, the manager, the manager of the building has it. Yeah, the superintendent has it. But
Kitor place, Kitor.
Yeah, it's
the best man.
It's a good point, actually. Maybe if you can't control it, maybe that's another reason to be mekel. But anyway, Rav Moshe is mekel.
If I remember correctly, you need to have in your mind that you cannot tell the guy to try to put the heat higher because you want for the food to be hotter. So you need to think about it, not tell him. It's correct, it's talk about it.
You might get sick if you don't tell.
Yeah, I mean,
I remember you said something about not to tell the guy to.
I didn't say that, but you for sure can't tell him. For sure can't tell him.
So people do this, they wrap their food in aluminum and stick it on the heater?
I don't know. It's been many years since I lived in New York, so I don't know.
Does it have that matter of being sick?
No. being sick means if it's like cold, but if it's already on and you just want it a few degrees higher or lower, that's not called being sick. Okay. Now, Baruch Hashem, that we are learning today, so I can correct my mistake from yesterday. Ready?
Yes.
Yesterday I said that if you have a pot that you took off the blech, like the hot part of the blech, and you put on the cold part of the blech, where it's not yet, so let us by. Yesterday I told you, I don't know if I should remind you what I told you, because I made a mistake, so why should I reinforce the mistake? I said yesterday that Moshe allows you to slide it back. But that was incorrect. Moshe does not allow you to slide it back. Moshe, just on the contrary, Moshe is machmer, and he says as follows. It's two sides of the same coin, but it's the opposite. He says, if you, let's say you want to take something out of the fridge and you want to heat it up to less than Yatsa lettuce boy, which is allowed, less than Yatsa lettuce boy. So if you put it in a place that's less than Yatsa lettuce boy, let's say the top of a pot, this pot is less than Yatsa lettuce boy, no problem. But he says, if you want to put it on the blech, and the blech has some parts that are Yatsa lettuce boy and some parts not, he says, no, you can't put it on that blech because it's like one entity. So therefore, you cannot put it on the part that's not Yatsa lettuce boy because it's almost like putting it on the part that is Yatsa lettuce boy. So he is machmir in the other way. You understand? I used that svara as a kula to say, well, if it's one entity, so if you put it on that side, you can move it back. He doesn't say that. He says it's one entity, so you can't put it there even to heat up to less than Yatsa lettuce boy. So I stand corrected. Bottom line is, if it's off, if it's in a spot that's less than Yatsa lettuce boy, you cannot move it back. Unless you had it in your hands or had it in mind. But I'm saying if you put it down there, it's not considered that it's still on the blech.
You slide it. You don't even pick it up.
Doesn't make a difference. By muktzah, there's a difference how you move it, But by chazorah, there's no difference.
If it's Yatsa lettuce boy and the pot is Yatsa lettuce boy, you're allowed to put it on the other side.
If it's still Yatsa lettuce, you can move it around, yes. Within the Yatsa lettuce area, you can move it to hotter or less hot areas. That's no problem.
Remember, the food itself has to be Yatsa lettuce, right now.
The food itself has to be Yatsa lettuce if it is liquid for Sfardim.
You're saying the issur to get to Yatsa lettuce is the food, not the pot.
I think it's the
Yeah,
pot, Rabbi.
the food.
When you put your finger
For
and your
example,
food,
people
Rabbi?
say the blechs are not allowed. So let's just say this is the pan, and the food is only halfway deep. Let's say it's chicken, halfway deep, and the pan is this high. So you're allowed to put this, let's say, to touch the blech, and it's going to get warm and warm up the food. But the only part that's going to get super hot is the actual top half of the
That's
pan.
interesting.
So the top half of the pan is touching the blech. The top half of the pan on this side doesn't have food. It's only the bottom half of the pan that has food.
I don't know, you're putting it under the blech or on top of the blech?
Let's say that this is the blech.
Yeah.
I'm putting it right here.
Or next to the blech?
Yeah, on parallel to the blech.
Oh, not on top, like on the counter next to the
Yeah,
blech.
for the ones who say you can't put things on the blech,
Okay, so you're putting it next to the blech,
exactly, pretty much touching the blech.
touching the blech.
But
Okay.
it doesn't have food. Okay, let's say you move everything to this
What
side.
if you put a stone in your pot and then your food?
One second, go
Then you
ahead.
have let's say all the food is only from here to here. You have this much amount of food to say, so it's going to warm this up, which eventually is going to warm something over here.
If the food is not going to get to Yatsa lettuce boy, it's not a problem. Now, it sounds like very risky business, what you're saying. How do you know how, whatever. But I'm just saying, if the food is not going to get Yatsa lettuce boy, it's no problem. I just want to tell you what my uncle did, talking about Yatsa lettuce, not reaching Yatsa lettuce and all that. So he's a bit like of an engineer. He's a very handy guy. So when he was working on renovating his house, so he made, you have a hot water heater. You want to use it on Shabbos. But it's a problem, obviously, because when you empty it out, the even if you turn it off, so there's nothing heating it, but the water is hot. Every time you take water out, new cold water comes in and it heats up. So he made a special hot water heater and he set the temperature to be less than Yatzeleres, 109. I don't know exactly, but something like that.
So never.
And he turned it off before Shabbos. So any water, it's not going to turn on the whole Shabbos because it's off. And any cold water that comes in is not going to get heated to Yatzeleres Bay because it's not Yatzeleres Bay.
It's off.
It's off.
So
But he has warm water.
Colder and
He has
colder.
warm water. He has water, a whole tank.
How it turns 109, it's off.
Because if it's, one more time, 2 points. If it's on, so then if it's on, set at 109, but bringing cold water in may turn it on. Like when you open an oven and you cause
Right,
a
it's going
flame.
to change the temperature.
Understand?
No, he's
That's
gonna
one
make it
issue.
work. Not
It's going to
change-
make it work. That's
It's not
one
a problem
issue.
changing the temperature, the problem with having.
Turn it on. He's going to
If
turn
it's
it on.
always on though, it's always.
Yeah, but I don't think it's always on.
Either that they sell is.
1 second. Then there's a second issue with taking cold water and adding it to a tank that's hot, and you'll heat it up. You understand? That's the second issue. So he took care of both issues. 109 off. Nevertheless, he was not able to use his whole fancy system because what happened is that there were two hot waters next to each other, right? One was the regular one, and one was the Shabbos one, and the heat slowly spread through the pipes into that
So it
space.
took it off beyond, so yeah, it's fine.
No, it just ended up that the heat of the regular one, which he didn't turn off because he wanted it, to be there for after Shabbos, whatever, that heat slowly heated up the water in the pipes, and heated up all the way till it reached that.
And you realize that the other one was getting super.
And he realized that the other one, or at least when he turned it on, the beginning of it was Yatzeleres Bay. So I'm just saying, heat can creep up on you. I'm just mentioning that. Yes.
They sell water heaters, little boxes.
So,
Remember, you set your temperature, water goes through it and only gets to that temperature.
okay, fine.
Wait, that's always running? That wouldn't be allowed. It's not
They
always
have-
running.
I mean, you can't cause it to turn on. That's a separate issue. But if you turn it off,
No, it's
I mean, you won't
always
have
on.
much water. But whatever.
It's always turning
I don't know.
on.
Second day of holidays,
We
I'm allowed to
have-
take cigarettes fire to fire.
Whatever temperature you want.
Cigarettes.
Always burning 109?
What they do in
Ushmatem ma'od
I'm
lenafshotechem.
not smoking,
Baruch Hashem.
but I see people smoke fire to fire.
They didn't ask me for a heter.
No, 1 second. Fire to fire.
I'm
What
not
about
giving
cook?
a heter for smoking. Sorry.
1 second.
No
Cook.
heter.
Fire to fire.
Yeah.
Only when it passes.
And I go to my Christian. No, fire to fire, it's okay. What about take hot water shower? Is fire to fire? I'm asking.
אנחנו לא לומדים הלכות יום טוב עכשיו.
But
אין זמן.
We're gonna get it.
I don't know. Not today. All right, my friends. You know what? I'm going to discuss a plata soon. I'll discuss a plata right now, actually. Let me just go to a plata, my friends. Gentlemen, your attention, please. Your attention, please. Thank you. As far as reheating stuff on a plata, so there are lenient opinions, there are strict opinions. Meaning to say, Rabbi Avad Yosef, we already mentioned in the past, holds that it's okay. It's not a place for cooking. Reheating, yes. Heating, yes, but not cooking. Rav Moshe Feinstein holds the same thing. Rav Vosner and Rav Auerbach are strict, and they hold that since for Shabbos we define cooking as heating, that is cooking, even if it's not cooking from raw, but taking a liquid and heating it up is considered cooking. They say it is considered a normal place to cook, and therefore they are strict. So, yesh v'yesh.
But the platter in that plate and the blech is the same thing?
But it's a covered flame.
No, the plata yesh yoter makom lahakel. ולחמם שם הדברים שאין בו משום בישול. All of this is only if there is no bishul issue. That means it's fully cooked and dry, or if it's liquid, that it's still hot, right? That's what we're discussing. But if it has those conditions, so יש יותר מקום להקל על גבי plata. Because a blech is maybe the metal is tafel, is secondary to the oven, to the stove, and the stove is a normal place to cook. But a plata, yesh lomar, that it's not a normal place to cook because you don't cook there, you just heat there. So what to do, you have to ask your Rav. But
No, just to know if they.
yesh yoter makom lakel. Yesh yoter makom. Yes.
How do Ashkenazim warm food on Shabbat day?
On a plot.
On a plata, well, those that follow Shlomo Zalman and Rav Vosner, their only option is to do it on top of a pot, on either on a plata or on a blech, or on an upside down pot is good also, like we said yesterday. On a blech directly, no. On a plata directly, no.
Put a piece of aluminum foil.
Overturn pot on a plata or a full pot on a plata. That means you take a baking tray, you turn it upside down, and put on top of that. Exactly. No, but together with the plata, empty pot on a fire directly, no. But an empty pot on top of a plata or on top of a blech is yeshuter makom lakel. You understand?
Yeah, can't you just put an aluminum foil?
Sorry?
Does it matter what kind of hefsek it is? So
aluminum
can
foil.
you use a couple of sheets of?
No. It has to be something that creates a separate space. Separate space.
Aluminum
There's
foil is
there's
not,
very
right?
thin aluminum pans
Yeah.
for like cookies and stuff. Like
Bakasha. Yeah, I know what you mean.
You
Trays.
put it on top of that.
Yeah.
And that would probably be that because it would be so heavy, the pot itself. It would
I don't know.
crush
I don't know. It depends.
What if it does
depends.
crush it and it hits the bottom? It actually.
Not recommended. Not recommended.
In that same vein, they make these pans that you're talking about, that the bottom has ridges. So when you turn them upside shallow, when you turn it upside down,
That's so
it
great.
tends to crush, but still there's a ridge.
Right.
So part of it's higher, part of it's lower.
I don't know. It's getting too complicated for me. I don't want to give my own personal opinion.
So wait, so then what's the difference between the plot and the black?
Yeah.
Both of them you have to do it.
According to that opinion,
No, according to Rav Vosner and of Auerbach, there is no difference. Rav Moshe is more makel. That's all. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's not Mikhail.
Even for Anuravad, there's also more makel. I'm not saying a plata is permissible. I'm saying there's more reason to be makel, or more poskim that are makel, because a blech is nullified to the oven, which is a normal place to cook, but a plata is not a normal place to cook. On the other hand, it is a normal place to reheat. I'm just saying there's reason to be makel more with a plata than a blech. That's all. Practically, those that are strict on a plata will only heat on top of a pot or on top of a full pot. Personally, I don't heat anything on Shabbos
You started
except for challah
pizza.
on a pot. Because according to the Alter Rebbe, the definition, challah is from before Shabbos.
Yeah, okay.
But according to the Alter Rebbe, the definition of liquid is very strict. Even a small amount of liquid is liquid. So that's problem A, how to find something dry. Challah is dry. But even that, I don't put it directly on a plata. We use a plata, but I would only put it on top of a pot.
Why only,
Yeah.
why only bread? Because you don't know what you have, because
Because bread is yalesh,
I'm saying because the Balatanya is,
is strict on the definition of liquid.
what's the whole?
Anything something that has no liquid at all. I mean, we'll learn about it. But if it has even a small amount of liquid, it could be a problem.
So rice.
We'll learn about it. If it's actually dry, and it's dry. But if it has some liquid, then it could be a problem.
I have to.
We'll learn. It's too much to get
I
into.
have to apologize. They're hot for the coffee. They put it the night before for the sitting.
Yes, we did go there.
I apologize for that.
Go ahead.
All right.
They put it the night before. I misunderstood. I apologize. Mechila. Atati.
Can't really hear you.
When we're not referring to actual food on a plata, right? Like directly on.
Yeah, or if you have something that you can put directly, like a challah, either way.
So
Either way.
that would then be permissible.
What?
If I put my food into a pan and I pan on the block,
Depends according to which opinion.
it's go machmer.
The Machmer opinion would not allow it, no.
But the pan itself is not already like a separation.
No.
Already double.
No, the pan is totally nullified to the food. It's serving the function of helping the food. It's not a separation. Okay, now yesterday
לא, כל השקר.
okay, I do want to mention, speaking of heating chalas, Reb Shlomo Zalman has a nice little heter that even though he's strict about heating things on a blech with HaKadosh Chazar, he says a challah is okay. Not directly on the fire, but a little bit on the side. And the reasoning, not directly on the, in other words, you have a blech, underneath it you have a fire. I'm saying, not directly above it, on the side. On the side. Now, I couldn't get my hands on the sefer that quotes him. It's not in the Shmir Shabbos. It's in another sefer called Mor HaShabbos, which I do not have in this little thingy here, so I was not able to look it up. Ma'or HaShabbat. Mor HaShabbat, who wrote it, I don't know, but it's like 4 halakim, very, very thorough. A lot of stuff in there. No, just Hebrew. Anyway, he says that that Reb Moshe allows the challah not directly above the fire, and Rav Farkash says that the reasoning behind that may be the opinion of the Ran that we mentioned earlier. The Ran says if you're heating something in a place that's normal to cook, but not normal to cook that thing, like challah on a stovetop, or like a pot maybe in an oven, you know what I mean? The Ran would hold that it's okay. So since a blech, anyway, yesh makom la'akel, right? A blech, maybe there's a reason to be lenient, but together with the fact of the Ran, that the challah is not normally cooked on a stove, maybe that's Reb Shlomo Zalman's reason. So it's just something worth mentioning.
Ovadia is okay to put the challah on the blach?
Yeah.
On top of the... Oh,
Dry.
Baruch Hashem.
Dry. No, if it's dry on a blech, also Ovadia permits. I'm
If I
sorry.
remember correctly, I think I remember seeing once that the Ben Ish Chai says that putting bread to warm up on Shabbat is makal hafish. So it's nice.
No, you're mistaken. You're most definitely mistaken, but you
Fine,
may be
it's
talking
very- I don't
about
think so. Fine.
you may be talking about toasting bread.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's not challah. When you're heating up your challah, you're not toasting it. Nobody wants toast for the lunch.
No.
I'm not talking about toasting your challah. I'm talking about you want hot challah for your Shabbos lunch. You're not toasting it. It doesn't get toasted. It's not like a piece of toast.
You put it on top of the
What?
pot.
It's not toasted.
On the top of the
I had
pot.
challah this week.
You put it on the plot, it'll even burn hot.
Okay, then he didn't do it right. That's not the objective of putting challah on a pot. The objective is to heat it up a little bit. Nobody wants toasted challah. No, that's not what I'm talking about, at least. You want to talk about toasting challah? That is a discussion. Maybe it's a problem.
Meaning if I would take sliced challah bread
That may be a problem.
and flip it like this.
Again, that may be a problem. That may be a
Or
problem.
just to put challahs on.
Just to heat it up. I'm not talking about toasting it.
You put it on top of this pot.
No.
It's too much hot over there. You don't want that.
See what the kamala is.
That's why it's toasted. That's why.
Okay, my friends.
It's going to be really fine.
I just want to mention that we touched upon yesterday the question of cooking with a timer. And I mentioned Ramosha's opinion, cooking with a timer.
What does that mean?
That means you have a,
On and off.
you want to put, a Shabbos clock to turn your plata on. And before Shabbos, you already put something on it, and it's going to cook when Shabbos comes in. I'm sorry? I don't know.
I do that. I have a timer in my closet.
And
I don't want that thing running. After these people in New York, whatever with them.
what do you do? What do you do with it?
I have it on a timer.
Yep.
Before Shabbos.
Yep.
And at a certain time, it turns the pot on. And then it turns it off at a certain time.
But what's on the plata? What food is on the plata?
Nothing.
Oh, use it for reheating, not for.
Yeah,
Okay,
nothing
fine.
cooking.
Okay, I'm talking about cooking. I'm talking about you leave something,
Like a burner.
you leave something that's going to cook overnight,
What about
but it's
me?
not cooked yet.
Okay.
It's gonna start cooking on Shabbos. Exactly, a crock pot, and you're going to start cooking it at 6 in the morning. You leave it, I
It's
mean,
not cooked bichlal, and
it's
you're
not
cooking
cooked.
6 in the
What's
morning.
happening if it's
exactly,
cooked?
exactly. 6 in the morning is not practical, it's going to go
What's
bad. in
happening? I
between.
cooked it before
It's going to go
Shabbat.
bad in
Why
between.
bad? It's 6 hours to cook something.
No, for raw food, you leave it out from the beginning of Shabbos to 6 a.m.
No,
gonna
you
go
don't
bad.
have to. You could put it in the fridge. At 5 a.m.
No, I'm talking about leaving it there. I'm not talking about putting it on
Is there a
Shabbos.
difference?
There is a difference. Putting it on Shabbos is a whole other question of the act, participating in the act of cooking. We said yesterday that you can't put something.
I saw the Ravadia says you could put the soup on the blech on Shabbat and then wait till the timer go on. It'll cook it.
Yeah, but you have the intention.
I have to look that up. That could be only if it's lach that's already cooked. So together with the tziruf of Bishlat HaBishul, maybe it's two things. I don't know. I have to see it. The Kitzur, the bottom line is Rav Moshe says not to allow it. Two reasons. One we said yesterday is that he holds that perhaps when it starts cooking on Shabbos, it's mityaches, that action is related to you. In other words, just like if a goy does something on Shabbos, his action is related to you, he's doing it for you. So too, if you cause, even though you caused it before Shabbos, but you cause something to start on Shabbos, midrabanan, he's not saying d'oraita, but midrabanan, perhaps that action is also related to you. It's considered as if you did it in a d'orabanan way, like a kal v'chomer. Even when the guy does it, it's considered like you did it midrabanan. How much more so if you cause it to happen, it should be like you did it.
There's a specific gezerah for your lot.
Right. Well, he says this is included, even more so. It doesn't exist for Kalim, but he holds that this is more than Kalim. This is your action. In the sense, you are causing it to happen.
Yom Tov is
I was just gonna ask that, Yom Tov.
a different halacha?
Yeah.
Now, 1 second. I just want to clarify. 1 second. I just want to clarify. Reb Moshe says, if you had started even a minute before Shabbos, then it's okay, because the whole action is mityaches, is associated with that moment.
But you said
Just like a
time.
person who shoots an arrow, right? Whatever that arrow does is the effect of his shooting it. So it's considered that he did it at that moment. So when you put a pot with raw meat in it a minute before Shabbos, that's okay, because that cooking is associated with the action of that moment before Shabbos. But if you didn't start cooking at all until Shabbos comes in, so that's when it starts. So maybe that is connected to an action of yours that you caused on Shabbos.
So we have another question.
Or you can set it before Shabbos. Everything is after your action before Shabbos.
Right. You could argue that way. Or Moshe obviously holds that until the action of the cooking starts. It's not considered like you shot the arrow. That's like a causing.
But then that whole argument goes out, because the whole argument is, even though there's an action on Shabbos, it's mityaches.
Because that's all one action. This is the argument, because that's one action. That action started, it's all one thing. Over here, it's not one thing. It's one thing that's causing another thing. So until it starts, maybe it's not considered started.
Rabbi, I have another question. Rabbi.
You could argue. It's a chiddush. Not everybody holds of it. Yes. 1 second.
No, I have the same question, Siman, Yom Tov.
Go ahead. Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. Next.
I let
No, no, no,
the Yom Tov.
If you could cook, for sure, with a timer, what's the
But
problem?
you're not transferring the flame, it's an argument. So if you have a timer and the burner turns on and off,
Yeah.
By itself,
Yeah, what's the problem?
that's permissible.
Why not?
Even it's not like you have to transfer the flame or always leave it on.
No,
If we finish Shabbat, did we finish what he was going to say?
no.
So Rabbi.
What I was going to say is that Rav Moshe has another problem with zilusa de Shabbos. This is a catch-all phrase for Shabbos dik, for not doing things that are inappropriate for Shabbos,
Before we go
against
there,
the
can I ask-
spirit of
The
Shabbos.
spirit of Shabbos.
Is it a G or a C?
What?
Shabbos
Shabbos
day.
day or Shabbos day?
Shabbos day.
I don't know. It's a Yiddish word. I don't know.
Can I
The
ask-
point is that it's zilusa de Shabbos means it's a disgrace for Shabbos. It's a disgrace that your home should be, going on as if it's not Shabbos, with things cooking and things going on and off and blah, 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 sprinklers, all of that. Now, this is where you asked yesterday about lights. Moshe says lights, because people have lights on timers even during the week, so he doesn't consider it zilusa. But things like cooking, which people don't usually do during the week, I mean, nowadays people do, but at least then they didn't do it during the week really, so it looks like your Shabbos is turning into a weekday. No, Moshe holds that there's two problems, like I said before. Even just the fact that it's happening on Shabbos, he says, could be like it's your action, midrabanan. So that's another issue he has with it. So he wouldn't allow it anyway.
Okay,
Yes, when it starts on Shabbos, it may be considered like it's like you're doing it, midrabanan, since you caused it. Yes.
Let's go back about the question about the timer. We said if we put it to click on Shabbat, what happens if I start on Friday to cook it with the timer? And half an hour before Shabbat, it's cooked fully. I put timer to work. Half an hour, I stop in Shabbat, and then continue the next day.
That's actually a very good idea. And last time I learned this, we came up with an interesting idea. I think maybe somebody said he even did it. The question was, you cook your chicken soup Thursday night.
What, 50%?
Then you freeze it on Friday. And then you leave it on your blech frozen before Shabbos. It defrosts overnight. And then the plata goes on in the morning and you have hot soup for lunch. You don't want it cooking the whole Friday night and Shabbos morning. It's going to turn like dark, deep dark soup. On the other hand, you don't want to cook it like this because Moshe says not. So here you're going to reheat it basically. You're going to reheat it with a timer. That's the question. In other words,
it's similar, but my question is that
more or less
it's different. In mine, let's say chamin, okay, it's cooked fully. I put it half an hour before Shabbat, and the timer is click after Shabbat. It's off, like 1 hour after
I understand,
Shabbat.
and then it turns on again.
Yes.
On and off.
On
So it
Shabbat.
cools down and then it heats
By
up
itself.
again.
So
Same thing.
I'm
So
not-
more or less the
it's
same thing.
Similar to that.
More or less same thing.
Yes.
What does it make a difference? No.
I did not
It
know
turns
that.
off, the food cools, turns on again and heats up. Same thing.
Same thing.
B'kitzur,
Even according to Moshe.
B'kitzur, I must say that I didn't look into it, except for the fact that I saw a Forgash brings yesh v'yesh. Some are mekel and some are machmer. And he doesn't really conflict with it.
Yesh v'yesh is.
I understand, but reheating is maybe not, the whole thing is like it's like in the air. Zilusa, it's not like a clear isser. So when it's just reheating and not actually cooking, some are lenient. I'm just saying, I'm not giving up.
Okay, if you look for this,
It'll be the same thing, it'll be raw, you're gonna put the timer, before Shabbos,
No, Moshe says not. That's what I'm saying.
a raw meat, solid.
Anything, it doesn't make a difference, whatever it
Turn
is.
off on the timer.
Anything that is being cooked for the first time, Moshe says not. If it's being reheated and not cooked, then there are mekilim. I'm not saying what the halacha is because I didn't look into it. I just saw that there are mekilim.
Rabbi, if you looked at that, if you can look also, I can put it in the refrigerator and put it before it's click on for the next day.
Not on Shabbos. On Shabbos you can't do it.
You cannot.
Using the timer on Yom Tov is okay because you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov. You can't set it on Yom Tov. You set it before Yom Tov. That's
Ralph,
fine.
could you add to it, like maybe I only put a little bit of water and then it goes into my soup before it turned on Shabbos, and I didn't remove the pot?
Can't add to it on Shabbos.
You
You
can't.
can't cause any cooking, even indirectly. Okay, 2 blechs is the same as 1 blech. Whatever is the halacha of 1, it doesn't help to add a second one. On a plata we discussed, from the top of a pot to a blech, depends on the status of a blech. Okay, if you have food on the top of a pot and you want to move it down to a blech, if you consider that a blech is a normal place to cook, you can't move it down because you're taking it from a top of a pot, which is not normal, putting it down to a place that is normal. If you consider a blech not normal, then it's fine because you're just moving it between 2 places and not normal to cook.
Whenever you mentioned timers, you're allowed, like, since you're allowed to use timers, you're allowed to, to change the time, if it's just to add it to an address.
It's complicated.
Because you're a mechanic, you don't do,
The old timers are mechanic.
The pin to put.
The ones that are
pin, less
mechanic,
pin.
the ones that are mechanic,
Longer,
Yeah. exactly,
less, you're not supposed to.
exactly,
But you're stopping the rotary.
exactly. You can make it stay off for longer or stay on for longer,
Yeah,
but you can't make it go on sooner or go off sooner.
Aha.
Like you mentioned, like with the go, you.
All
can
mechanical,
understand.
as long as it's just pins or buttons, nothing
Yeah, if
electric.
he wants to shut the light, like if you go, you want to shut the
Exactly.
light, you're holding his hands.
Exactly. The timer wants to turn it on, and you're saying, no, don't turn it on yet. That's okay. You didn't tell it to do anything. You just told you stopped it from doing something. That's okay. That's like my friend. He made a switch on his fridge, on the outside of his fridge, so that when he turns the switch, then the light that's inside doesn't go on when he opens it. So instead of unscrewing the bulb every Friday, he just flips the switch before Shabbos. And now when you open the door, the light doesn't go on. But one week he forgot to flip the switch before Shabbos. So he asked me if he can flip it on Shabbos. So I said, if the switch itself does not cause any electric reaction, right? It just will cause the light to not go on, then it's okay. Because all he's doing is causing a light not to go on. So what? You're allowed to cause a light not to go on. You can't cause it to go on, but you can cause it not to go on. Maybe it's muksa, whatever, do it kalachayat. But other than that, it was okay.
Yeah, but you're stopping a circuit. That's like if I throw an axe at this wall and I cut the electrical lines on the inside, I'm stopping the circuit. That's what he's doing.
No, he didn't stop it because wasn't created yet. He stopped it from being started. This switch, the light wasn't on yet. By turning this switch, he causes that the light should not turn on. There was no circuit that he was completing or interrupting because it wasn't on yet.
Well, if you interrupt the circuit, it just goes back, unless it's DC current.
I'm just saying it wasn't connected at that point because the light was not on. Okay, last but not least, in the handout, opposite of fireplace, if you want to heat something up and there is no issue of bishul, you still cannot put it close to the fireplace because then you might forget and stoke the fireplace. But if you put it a little bit further back, then it's okay. Putting it further back is the same as putting it on a covered fire because that reminds you not to stoke the coals. All right, my friends, we have 11 minutes to do review of Siman 253. All right, so I'll just shoot some definitions at you. I emailed this out earlier. Shehiyah, who can define Shehiyah? Leaving on a fire from before Shabbos. Michael ben Drusoy.
1/2 or 1/3,
depending on
Sephardic or.
No, it's not Sephardic Ashkenazic, sorry. Actually, Rashi maybe is Ashkenazi, Rambam is Sephardic, so you could pin it on that too. But there's no, in practice, what's the halacha? Lachatchila half, but you have it a third. Meaning to say, better to make sure it's a half cook. But if it's at least a third cook, we're not going to forbid it, but you have. Okay, Tanur.
Like
Yeah, it's an old
the old stuff today.
Like the old days, is what I'm talking about. How did they look?
It had a circle.
Like a beehive. It was thicker on the bottom and thinner on the top. Kira?
The one with that narrow top.
Place for two, not narrow, place for two pots. Like a rectangle shaped oven. Kubach? Square oven, exactly. Smicha? Not the smicha that we're getting here. Literally leaning, but in the context of shehiyah, it means to put something close to an oven, not inside it or even on it, but close to it. Yad selet is boy. Too hard to touch. Now, by the way, I mentioned earlier, Moshe says 110. That's lahachmir 110, not lahaka. Meaning to say that you can heat something to 110 because that might be considered yad selet is boy, but it's not for sure yad selet is boy. He's not sure about it. Meaning to say, if you want to take something that's 110 and put it on the fire and say, well, it's already yad selet is boy, no big deal. No, not so fast. Maybe it's yad selet is boy. To know for sure that it's yad selet is boy, Moshe says it has to be 160. Between 110 and 160, we have to be machmir.
Less than 110, you could.
Less than 110 is for sure not. More than 160 for sure is. In between, Rav Moshe says, be machmir both ways. Don't bring it to that point, but if it's at that point, you can't necessarily make it higher. Understand? Okay, hatmana.
Insulation.
Insulation, grufa. They got the coals. Ketuma. Exactly. Bichdei sheyasa. Exactly. And that you have to wait for that amount of time. If a person did a forbidden shehiyah, or Chazar, he has to wait that amount of time after Shabbos before he can benefit. Psik Reisha. Decapitation. Excellent. Permissible or forbidden on Shabbos?
The person.
What?
It's permissible if you have a knife, if you don't need that. It's like.
Big mistake.
Not
Not allowed. Not allowed. I'm glad we had this chazara. It's worth it just for this correction. Psik Reisha is absolutely forbidden. It's a deraisa. It's a Torah level prohibition. The only thing we learned about Psik Reisha is that Psik Reisha al yidei goy is mutter. If a goy is doing something that is going to cause something else, but the main thing he's doing is permissible, right? You're allowed to ask him to do it because it's not a forbidden action for whatever reason. Even though it's causing something else, that's allowed. So he's taking the pot off the coals. The coals are going to roll around. That's okay. Because taking a pot off is okay. And the coals rolling is not his intention. That's okay. For a Jew to do it is a deraisa.
So go open the fridge while the lights are on.
Exactly. Open the fridge while the lights are on is a Torah level problem. But to ask the goy to open the fridge while the lights are on is okay. Because he doesn't care about the lights. So he's not your shaliach to turn the lights on.
Siman, that you have to tell the girl to put the pots next to.
That's different.
Simcha Ches. What we learned yesterday. Yeah. Chazara.
You have to be a holder in your hand.
Chazara is returning back to the fire on Shabbos. Ein bishalach abishal biyavesh.
There's no cooking.
And we should
You have to cook it when it's dry.
Exactly. Belach, what about belach?
It's a machloket.
What's the halacha?
You cannot.
You cannot. Bishalach abishal belach.
You have to follow.
cannot.
If it's still hot and you follow the
Basically, yes, we should have bishul.
Exactly. 7 conditions of chazara. 7. No?
It's 1+3, no?
It's covered.
Covered.
Doesn't have to be
Have it in your hand. Still hot.
No liquid tension.
No liquid. Why not? Could have liquid. Still hot. If it's still hot.
Attention, you might.
Have in mind to return.
Can't place it.
Sorry.
Can't place it on.
Can't put it down. Exactly. Sorry. Fully cooked. Excellent. Original pot. I must have counted something twice. Because the last one, which it's not clear if it applies today, but not to put it into an oven. Okay, so just to go back to some of those, which of them is a machloikis? Which of them perhaps does not everybody hold of?
Putting it down on the floor.
Putting it down on the floor is a machloikis in the Gemara and in the Rishonim, but nevertheless, both the Machaber and the Ramah do hold it. So in practice, we're strict on that. What is there a machlokes about?
machloket is liquid.
You can put it back and burn on fire.
I'm sorry?
You can't put it directly on the fire.
Why, if you like it, you put it back.
What does that mean?
There's no machloket about it.
No, I want to know what there is a machlokes about.
Oh.
What is the which of these conditions does have a machlokes?
Maybe the end, when you hold it, the way to hold it,
That's
What
interesting.
do you mean?
with one end.
Oh, can you put it down and put your hand on it?
Yes.
We did say machlokes about that.
That's a little, no.
Yeah, it's a lettuce boy.
Intention.
According to the machaber, it has to be a lettuce boy if it's liquid. According to the Ramah, it could be still hot enough to serve guests. Thank you very much. The machaber holds you don't have to think. You don't have to have in mind to put it back. You just have to not put it down. Also, pina mimechem lemechem, returning it. Emptying it from one pot to the other. The machaber does not mention that. Even the Ramah does not mention that, and the Mishnah Berurah doesn't hold of it either. The Magen Avram does, and the Alter Rebbe does. So
Yeah,
that's a bit of a
because it
machlokes.
cools rapidly.
Okay, so some hold of it, but some don't. Now, to make it even more complicated, we said that the Ran doesn't hold of a whole bunch of these if you took it off the fire on Shabbos. He says that some of them only apply if you took it off before Shabbos and you want to put it back on Shabbos. Which are those? Which are those that the Ran says you can dispense of if you took it off the fire on Shabbos and are putting back on Shabbos?
Yavish.
If you don't let go of it.
Exactly. Even if you let go of it, even if you didn't have in mind, even if you turned it from one pot to the other, and perhaps even to put it back into an oven. All of those the Ran is okay with.
It's okay to touch it another pot.
So it's if it's
If it was on the fire when Shabbos came in, and you took it off, and then you want to put it back. Yes. The only case you can't is if you took it off on Friday afternoon, according to the Ran. Yes.
Rabbi, we talked about.
we talked about that.
Also, if you can put on a block, small pot and big pot, and then whatever left you can put in a small pot. Because it's in the stem heat.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
Yeah.
But then that's cooking.
No.
The first part you took off already.
Pouring hot water into cholent, allowed or not allowed?
Put it back.
Pouring hot water into cholent, allowed or not allowed? Not allowed? According to whom is it not allowed? Exactly. Marana Machaber. Marana Bet Yosef says you cannot pour from hot into cholent. Hot water into cholent. Why not? Oh yeah?
Two.
But in Israel, no. Only
Two
Morocco.
Sfaradim.
But less water tastes better.
Morocco, they used to do it.
Interesting. Interesting.
How?
Interesting.
How?
What after you with the same block?
No, because the truth is that in the Machaber himself, it's not so clear that it's not allowed. It's only if you look it up in the Beis Yosef. In the Machaber, it seems that his issue is that of course, it's a technique. You have to keep all the conditions of Chazar. The point is that in the Machaber, it seems like the issue may be just that that maybe the water is not Yad Seledas boy. And when you poured it, you're actually cooking. But in the Beis Yosef, he brings the opinion that says even if it is Yad Seledas boy, but when you pour it out, it's out of the Kli Rishon, you put it back in, it's like a different level of cooking. But you're right, there is makom lakel even according to the Machaber. So I'm not surprised that some are making.
Now what? What's the
What's
The Machaber in the Shulchan Aruch says that you're going. That's all. So I'm just saying
So why is that makom lavi?
because it's not clear. I'm sorry.
Yesh makom lavi.
I understand, but yes, it's not clear that it's asur. Is what I'm saying. If he says that the minhag in Morocco was to do it, it's not. There's-
Minhag in Morocco, a
there's-
lot of times with the farm, Ashkenazi.
That's also true. That's also true. But I'm saying in the Machaber itself, it's also not clear. Yes.
We can't actually. Ashkenaz.
Ashkenazim can if they follow the conditions of Chazar. That means you keep it in your hand, you didn't put it down, you had in mind to put it back, it's still hot,
No, we're talking
fully cooked.
about adding water.
Exactly. You take the water pot, let's say you have water in a pot or in a kettle, that's hot, it's on the fire, you pour it directly into the cholent.
But that's during the time before Shabbos or
No,
on Shabbos?
on Shabbos.
The Sephardi allowed to ask the Ashkenazi board?
Sorry?
The Sephardi allowed to ask the Ashkenazi to do that board?
That's an interesting shaila.
Talk about it. Let's talk about it. So yes,
We did not speak about it.
I bring a Ashkenaz to my guest or the house. We talked about that.
Hot water in it.
Didn't you tell a story about that? And the guy didn't want to do it.
Then you got another Ashkenazi.
I see.
You spoke about Shehiyah, getting your Ashkenazi brethren to do it.
No, this exact situation, the challenge.
Right.
I take the
Hot
water
challenge
from
from source.
my
Okay.
I heard him say once live, and then again, I'm not sure.
Interesting.
Same story.
Very good. All right. Tosfos. What does Tosfos say about Chazar? What's the opinion of Tosfos? That the conditions must be kept even Friday late afternoon, within a few minutes before Shabbos. And finally, the Brisker Rav, who did not hold it Lemaisa, but in theory held that the whole Shehiyah business does not apply to our ovens and stuff that doesn't flicker out like coals. But Lemaisa, we don't rely on that, but it is an interesting opinion. All right, my friends, it's been a pleasure learning together. Daniel Kahani says, not before Shabbos. Is that a condition? What do you mean not before Shabbos? On the contrary, you could do it even from before Shabbos. You could put it back on the oven.
Don't leave,
I
Mari.
think we addressed it already, yeah.
No,
Do we?
wait.
Okay, all the best, Rabbi Say. See you all next week with Hashem's help. Next week, we are starting Reish Nun Dalet 254. So get psyched for it, please.
Is he staying in there?